All right. So unlike a real podcast, there's no official start.
Uh-huh.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and we are here with Mr. Burda. So if you just want to give yourself a quick introduction about who you are.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Jeff Burda, and I am the director of the Counseling Center here at the University of Hartford, also known as CAPS.
All right. So what inspired you to first start your work in the psychology and mental health field?
Well, I actually started in psychology as in undergrad. Essentially, well, I first started off as a biology major and kind of moved into psychology as a secondary interest, and then did a little stint, if you will, in animal behavior research of all things, and quickly found out that the laboratory life and the research life was not I was not well suited for it, and so I took a job as essentially like a youth advocate. This was in Pennsylvania many years ago, and connected with. I would go out to young person's house, usually teenagers, and work with them both in the home and outside the home. And after that, I feel like I had essentially a calling to do more of the clinical work. So I went on to get my master's. I went on to get my doctorate degree, and all along the way, I had my own personal struggles. As a young person, like I would say, most of us in this field have experienced at some point, and found myself a good therapist actually, and who helped me a great deal. And sort of all of this came together, and I found myself thinking, well, I can do this. I can kind of be a support for someone, and um, decades later, here I am.
Yeah, do you think that like your previous work with animals had anything or like any help with what you do now?
With animals, well, it certainly helped me to, I think, better answer the neuropsych questions and the science questions on the national board exams.
Okay.
Sometimes I feel like in our field of clinical psychology, some of the struggle areas could be like statistics and some of the harder sciences, so to speak. Not that they were a breeze for me, but I think it gave me a foundation to be able to consume that kind of research and look at brain research, and uh, mostly understand what people are saying when they talk about the intersection of mental health in the clinical field and sciences. So in that respect, I think it helped me along.
Okay. That's interesting. I was just trying to see if you were going to call college students animals.
Oh yeah,
And
well, it was my first thought. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that in many ways, I don't want to go too far afield, but sometimes when I boil down the problems of mental health and clinical psychology, I bring it down to a very basic level, which is essentially, as humans, this is kind of my belief. Other people talk about this and write about this, that we tend to avoid the things that are scary, or that we don't want to do. Think about that paper or that project or test, that person we know we need to talk to, but we're afraid to. So we tend to avoid those stimuli, so to speak, right? And we tend to go towards the things that bring us pleasure, much like a lab rat,
yeah,
or a mouse.
got
I
it.
worked with mice mostly, but
Okay.
yes, yeah.
That's popular. Yeah. So I'm going to transition a little bit in the role of the counseling and psychological services at the University of Hartford.
Sure.
So how does CAP support the mental health needs of students here?
Well, in many ways, I would say the bulk of what we do at CAPS, honestly, is behind closed doors, and so we do a lot of individual therapy, so a lot of one-on-one therapy with students. That tends to be what they're seeking and what they're looking for, and we try to honor those requests the best we can. We're also pretty active in the community. I mean, as active as we can be when we're able to get out from behind those closed doors. We'll do outreaches. We'll go into the classrooms. We'll partner with other departments, offices on campus. Oftentimes around the topics of things you might expect, like stress management, adjusting to college, and then certainly some of the, I guess, heavier topics around suicide and suicide prevention. We also, as CAPS counselors, are on call 24/7. The only people who have that number are public safety, and
Mhm.
so we don't spread that
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
far and wide. But it's a lot goes on behind the scenes that I think the student body probably for sure, but maybe even other departments don't realize that we're putting out fires and kind of managing crises throughout our office hours, but also sometimes in the middle of the night and wee hours of the morning.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being at a university, I'm sure there are more specific like things that students will come for in general. Is there any broad thing that maybe you give to a new counselor coming in, like, hey, you're going to get a lot about this?
Yes, anxiety.
Okay.
I would say, anxiety is the number one concern that students are presenting on when they come in, and students report, certainly that we observe and that we see in students. And I think some can make an argument probably around our whole culture and society to some degree, even us older folks. But I've been here at the university for coming up on my ninth year, and I have seen trends in that direction, so to speak, with students really coming in with a lot of anxiety, and that can, as we know, that can manifest and take form in many different ways. Um, Sometimes it can make it difficult to sleep. Sometimes it can make it difficult to eat. It can make it difficult to slow down one's thoughts from worrying or thinking about the future. It can manifest physically, people getting sick, stomach aches, headaches, aches and pains. And I would say another manifestation would be something I mentioned earlier, avoidance.
Hmm.
So sometimes students, really, and they're not making a conscious decision to do so. They're just so overwhelmed and struck with anxiety that they might have even trouble interacting or going to the commons or leaving their rooms.
Hmm.
And so anxiety and overwhelmedness, if that's a word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll check that later.
Right, check it out.
So, just briefly, for students here, how would you tell a student to seek out this sort of help with CAPS?
Sure. Well, there's a couple ways. I mean, I would say the most common way and maybe the easiest way really is to send me an email. So my last name is Burda. It's B as in boy, URDA. Just email burda@hartford.edu and ask to make that first appointment. That actually will get the ball rolling. You don't have to say that much. You don't have to tell me what the problem is or the concern is or the issue is. Just say you'd like to make that first appointment. And then I pride myself, our team prides ourselves on responding as quickly as possible. Then, along with that, I'm going to ask you to send the best phone number to reach you, student ID, date of birth, and availability. And then we get you in for that first appointment. The first appointment these days for most students happens to be what we call an initial phone screening. And so we schedule those usually on the hour, and a therapist will call you, hopefully promptly on that hour. And this phone screening typically takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Ask you questions, things you might expect. What's going on? How can we help you? A little bit of history, and we'll also do our best to assess for safety and risk over the phone as well. And then once that happens, I said the latest number that I checked, it was upwards of like 80 to 85% of students after the phone screen are recommended for a course of brief treatment at CAPS, usually taking the form of one-on-one. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we get to talk a little less about CAPS and as a general and just your experience.
Yeah.
How do you think we can reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and especially among young adults?
It's a great question. I will say, it seems to me, and this is really anecdotally. I'm sure there's people out there studying it, but it seems as though the stigma is shifting, or I've observed it kind of shift on campus, and I'm hoping in the larger society and our local, our surrounding communities, partly because our demand is so high,
Mhm.
students really do reach out, and what we try to do, if we have the time and we have the resources, is really become more visible out in the community, so people can look at us and say, they just kind of look like normal people. I know they're therapists, they're
Mhm.
psychologists, but they're friendly. We can talk to them, we can engage with them. And so one of the platforms, I guess, or the modalities, if you will, when we get out into the community, is something called Caps Cafe. You may have seen those. We sometimes we'll have them in GSU, sometimes we'll have them in Commons, sometimes we'll have them in the residence halls or outside. And Caps Cafe is like you might expect. Usually there's some food, usually there's some drink, and it's really not heavy on the psychology or clinical aspect of what we do. It's really more of like, this is who we are. These are our services. Here's how you make a first appointment, and we really welcome anyone. If you're having what you feel like is minimal issues, so to speak, compared to some others, all the way to having significant concerns, to reach out to us. And then what we'll do from that point on is hopefully triage you,
Mhm.
and that if you need more supports than we can offer, we try to get you sometimes connected off campus. If it's a more common issue, for example, first years reaching out with adjustment concerns or homesickness, we may work with you one-on-one, but we may put on a group, a short-term group, to allow you to see that you're not alone, which I think is a big piece of reducing stigma, is to
Mhm.
show people that they're not alone.
Yeah, one thing that was spoken to me was that they believed that everyone should get therapy. Everyone should seek therapy. Is this something you would
Right.
agree with?
Not necessarily. So I would say, as the director of CAPS, I would say, if you don't know if you should seek therapy and you're having struggles or concerns, reach out to us anyway to make that first appointment for a phone screen. And as we talk to you, as we get to know you, as we see what your presenting concerns are, we may in fact say, keep doing what you're doing. You may want to get academic supports. You may want to go to your academic advisor. You may want to go to the dean of students office. And so we might encourage you to start talking to other people on campus and other departments that could support you. Or we may say, let's do 2 or 3 sessions and
Hmm.
see how you feel about this. Um, part of what's, I guess, a challenge for me as director is that I love working with people, obviously, and young people in particular. Our clinicians do too, but not every concern that comes in through a phone screen or that a student is having rises to the level of
Hmm.
being needing professional help, needing help from a licensed counselor. But I would say, when in doubt, reach out.
Yeah. Um, when seeking out help,
Mhm.
I've found that with parents or grandparents or older people and like older generations, there can be like shame in a way of seeking out therapy. People are becoming more accustomed to it, and that's helping with the stigmatization. But
Right.
how would you guide a student in either helping fight against the shame that they feel from parents or older generations, or how would you describe to a parent like this is something that you shouldn't be like ashamed of, that your child is seeking therapy?
Right.
Like maybe it's not something you did wrong, but just like there's nothing wrong with going to therapy.
Right. 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 It's a good question. One of the, I guess, I personally think it's a good aspect of this work, is that many students who come to see us, they're 18, or they're about to turn 18. Sometimes we'll have students who are 17, even 16 once in a
Hmm.
while. Um, but then, because of that, technically, they're adults, and our services are just like any other therapist in the community in terms of it being confidential.
Hmm.
And so, when students realize that and recognize that, sometimes there's an immediate relief, or felt safety, if you will, that um, they know the clinician, by law, cannot speak to parents or guardians, or anyone else for that matter, without their written consent or permission. And so, even though we might have parents emailing or calling, oftentimes with good intentions, or parents may be saying that I don't want my child in therapy. It's really up to the student themselves to go ahead and do that if they choose. Now, of course, the student who might come from that messaging or background that going to seek therapy means you're crazy or you're weak or dysfunctional in some ways. Like that's something I would work with the student, honor and validate that that's where they're coming from, and then try to work with them over time to kind of soften that up and shift their perspective. And usually, I will praise the student for taking the step and having the courage to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Earlier, when you mentioned that anxiety was almost like a trend
Yeah,
that's
it's a lot.
increasing in college students, young adults, do you think that like technology or social media obviously it does have an impact, but what degree do you think that impact is?
Right. So again, people are researching this, people are studying this. I think in the not too distant past, there was a Surgeon General report on social media and the intersection of technology and mental health. Um, I'm probably addicted to my phone, and maybe I'm not quite ready to admit that full addiction yet. Many of us are, I think, and so even aside from social media, this constant checking of the phone, looking for sex, looking for sex. That was a Freudian slip there. We'll go back to that. You can
Yeah.
ask me later about that.
Okay.
Looking for text messages that come through, searching the internet, whatever it might be. Um, I feel like people oftentimes, myself included, have trouble just sitting and being bored, and so we'll go to the phone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing per se, but I think that for many people it makes it difficult over time to be able to tolerate any kind of emotion because there's immediate kind of quick fix by going to the phone. And it could be a problem in that way. You've heard of mindfulness. You know what mindfulness is,
Yeah.
right? And so I work with students in that area to try to encourage and invite them to be more mindful and more present. And sometimes the phones will kind of technology will pull them away from that. And so in that respect, maybe not so good. Social media, I think the research is mixed. I think for certainly some of our more marginalized communities, social media could be a wonderful thing. They can find communities and validation and support and resources on those particular platforms. On the other hand, excessive use, overuse. I think for some people, and the research will bear this out, um, show that it can actually contribute to anxiety or depression, and the thinking around that or the observations around that have to do, I think, a lot with negative comparisons. So, looking at their life and how they look in their bodies and comparing them to others. This fear of missing out, FOMO thing. I don't
Hmm.
know if the kids these days are still using that term.
My mom uses it as well.
Right. So, fear of missing out is another one. And then with social media, I think just normalizing behaviors that can be harmful, self-harm, cutting, disorder eating, things of that nature. And so, young people who get caught up in that, I think it can deepen and worsen some of those concerns.
Yeah. Dealing with college students who are in the loop, in the know,
Yeah.
it's our younger generation. Do you have to keep up with trends or like things that are going on to be able to
I
help them in a
try
way?
not to.
Okay.
I'm really, really old school, and
Hmm.
so I think my first text was probably sent in like 2015. I held on to the flip phone for as long as I can. It's a personal choice, and
Yeah.
I'm not judging anyone who does it, but I'm not involved in social media or the newfangled apps. So as a person and my personality, I kind of almost move against that.
Got it.
But as director of counseling center, I do have to keep up with the trends, so to speak. But I don't think I definitely don't go out there and try to find it and figure out what's going on. That information comes to me, and so
Yeah.
working with students, I'll go to like the national directors conference, I'll go to regional conferences, and all I need to do is sit there and just absorb what the latest technology or the latest trends are. And I'm not a cutting edge guy, I would say, but I'm also just fine with asking
Okay.
or admitting that
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
First steps is acceptance, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It is first step.
Um, so, can you discuss any research or innovative approaches that CAPS has taken to better understand and address mental health issues in this demographic?
So now I'm going to contradict myself. So I'm saying I'm not cutting edge, technology, whatever. But one it is innovative. So we have the university has subscribed to an app or a platform called Talk Campus, and I think it's a company. Yes, it's a company based out of the UK. Um, as far as what they tell me, it's used on college campuses across the world. This particular app, and it's really easy to sign up for and download. All you need is your email, your UHeart email address, and once you're on it, it's essentially a confidential, anonymous peer support platform for mental health. And so I think there's groups on there that are specific to the university. So you might be talking to somebody that's actually on campus, but you can also expand and spread your wings quite far around the world and connect with college students who oftentimes are going through very similar experiences. And I haven't checked out the app lately. I'm not personally on it, but pretty sure that there's categories to make it less like you're jumping into a vast sea. But you can, if you're having trouble with interpersonally or with relationships, you can go into that chat room. Troubles with anxiety or depression, you can go into that chat room. Struggle with academics, eating, sleeping, whatever it might be. And so that's it's a 24/7 platform too. Our office is not open 24/7,
Yeah.
and so I think there's certain students out there maybe who are a bit reticent to reach out to CAPS, maybe have those face-to-face conversations. It could be a nice inroad to get them sharing and talking.
So, when we first started, you mentioned that there was almost a sense of like you understood what it felt like to have these sort of struggles. So, that's why you wanted to help, right?
Yes. Yeah, I can identify with a lot. I mean, different time period, different context,
Hmm.
but uh, the empathy is in there in a way that is personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes think like maybe things would have been different if I had resources like we do today?
I have thought that way before. I don't really think that way as much now, but I graduated undergrad in 1994, and so really a different landscape in so many different ways. Uh, One, with the college experience, but another, and with technology. I mean, there was no internet, or internet was in its like infancy or primitive form. Cell phones, technology was really nothing like it is now, of course. And mental health, at least in my world, I didn't hear much about it. It wasn't being talked about very much. And, quite honestly, I don't even know if there was a college counseling center at my undergrad institution. There probably was, but I don't remember,
Mhm.
or it wasn't being talked about very much. And so, yeah, sometimes I wonder, if I had reached out sooner and got support, with the course of my life, taken a different path. I guess everybody could think that
Yeah.
about their lives, and so I don't spend too much time
Mhm.
thinking about it. But sometimes, yes, I do wonder.
Yeah. Are there any personal stories you want to share around that, or we could leave that alone if you want?
Yeah. Well, what did you have in mind?
I
Just
mean, just understanding what it was like what you're going through, because people can be in similar situations, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I half joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist. There's a lot of truth to that, but I was a student in undergrad and probably through graduate school too, who was very hard on myself, and really had an identity shaped around um, getting that A at all costs, and performing well, and actually looking good. And so I think I did a pretty good job of, on the outside, looking like everything's fine. Nobody's really going to bat an eyelash because I'm getting straight A's or I'm in this club or this organization. But inside, I was really struggling A lot of low self worth, a lot of low self esteem, a lot of fears, a lot of feeling like I had to meet the expectations of parents and people around me, and if I didn't, they would be awfully disappointed in me, and I would let them down. And so that in some way propelled me to doing well in school, which was in many ways kind of laid a foundation for me to move forward. But on the other hand, what I learned about perfectionism or achievement is that it can be very hollow because you get that, at least in my experience, that initial rush of the good grade, and then you're on to the next one, and it never ends really. And then all the while, that I guess achievement, not only does it not last that long, but it's not for me, it wasn't a solid foundation to build happiness and self care and self compassion, because you wouldn't look at the I wouldn't look at the A plus, I would look at the B plus,
Mm.
and I kind of beat up on myself for the small things. And so that's kind of one form of some of my struggles along the way.
I'm hoping you can't read facial expressions because, like, I definitely don't conform to that 100%. No, no,
Right.
no way.
No,
No
not you,
way.
huh?
No, I'm not like
I
that
didn't know if
at
I'm
all.
allowed to kind of observe you and make that comment, but I saw some knowing head nods along the
Mm.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, moving on.
Let's talk about you.
Yeah. That will be off the books. That'll be the confidential
Yes, yes,
talk. Yeah.
okay.
So, are there any barriers or challenges that students commonly face when trying to access mental health services on campus, or maybe in general, if you know?
Yeah, so those to me are two questions. So the barriers to accessing CAP services. It always surprises me. I mean, well, sometimes students don't know about CAPS.
Yeah.
And I think we've certainly done better over the years, in my opinion, at promoting, advertising, telling students who we are and what we do. But still, there's thousands of students at UHARD, and some of them just don't realize that we exist. And so, first, knowing that we exist is important, and then how to make that first appointment is also important. So once you're kind of send that email, or give us a call, and you get that first appointment. The next barriers I think that students sometimes face is that we're a very small staff, and we treat a pretty large student body. And so, like I said earlier, most students want one-on-one therapy, and and I don't blame them. They want and I would say most students would love to have a therapist over the long term. So whether it's for a year or two or three or four that they're here, but unfortunately, we just can't offer all of
Mhm.
those services to every student. And so an obstacle or a barrier, I think, can just feel like, well, I reached out to CAPS, and CAPS maybe didn't give me what I was looking for, and they might feel disappointed. They might feel kind of let down. We try to find middle pathways for some of those students, and sometimes that'll take the form of a group. So we can't offer you individual, but we can offer you group. Most students cringe at that idea. They don't want to be involved in a group.
Yeah.
I can go on down that road more. And or if we can't offer you the individual, we have improved at essentially case management services, which means like we can help to the best of our ability, like find you a therapist off campus, um, and help you navigate the maze of insurance and cost and things of that sort. Uh, but at the end of the day, if you're getting off campus treatment, most likely you're going to have to pay something, as opposed to our services, which are covered under your tuition, free essentially, right?
Yep.
And then there can be all kinds of barriers to transportation as well. Some a good number of students out in the community are still doing telehealth and virtual, and that can be real convenient. But many are doing one-on-one, or students are looking for one-on-one. So not only do you have to pay for it, but you got to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, outside of the university, how would you describe seeking out the treatment? Is there a broad scale issue?
Yeah, well, you mean difficulty
Yeah.
kind of finding? Well, there can be. So, Hartford, West Hartford area, surrounding areas. Either I see there's we're fortunate in that there's a good number of clinicians, psychologists, social workers in the field and doing the work. However, there tends to be a high demand as well. And so sometimes I think in certain pockets of our outside communities it could reach like a saturation level where, quite frankly, therapists just don't have room on their caseloads, they don't have availability. And so it's kind of back to square one in terms of finding a therapist. Um, Back to the technology piece, it's easier certainly than decades ago to find a therapist. Psychology today, and I'm not getting paid by Psychology Today. It's really one of the preeminent search engines. Excuse me for that. Um, uh, that most I would say people use when looking for a therapist. You jump on Psychology Today. You can limit your searches according to insurance, gender, or sexual identification of the therapist, availability, all kinds of barriers to kind of hone in. Um, we also have a platform that the university has signed up for. I think we've been on it for about 5 years now. It's called Talk Campus. And so if you go to our Talk Campus website, these are clinicians in the surrounding community, usually Hartford area, who you know, really want to work with and specialize in working with young adults and college students. And it can be quicker and easier and faster to locate a therapist in this Talk Campus platform. Wait, Talk, yeah, Thriving Campus is the
Thriving
name of it.
campus. Got
Right.
it. Talking was the one earlier,
That's
correct?
the one earlier. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Um, and just previously you mentioned about the um, like students not wanting to be in groups. Is there something to that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, maybe this goes back in part to shame or social anxiety or not wanting your peers to know that you're struggling with a particular issue. And so, I want to validate that those are real concerns, and it could be difficult not only to reach out to a CAPS,
Hmm.
but and to go through the process, but then to get a referral to group. It's like, oh my goodness, now I have to talk about my issues or problems in front of other people. Um, one way we I guess try to help with that is that not all groups at CAPS are like you see in the movies, kind of open-ended process groups where everybody puts their toughest stuff on the table and we talk about it. We do have groups like that, but we also have groups that are more, I guess, semi-structured in that the clinician does a lot of the work around, guiding you through tips and strategies and tactics to deal with interpersonal conflict or how to deal with stress and anxiety. And I would say most students, can I say this? I would say I can. Most students who give it a try and take that leap of faith and have the courage to maybe give it 2 or 3 group sessions. They can benefit for a number of reasons, but I think one of the main benefits comes again from looking around and seeing that they're not alone. I think there's so many people out there who are suffering and struggling and feeling like they're the only ones.
Hmm.
So,
On this sort of note, how can friends and peers effectively support a young adult who may be struggling with mental health issues?
well, back to some of what we talked about earlier. Not everyone has a clinically diagnosable mental health issue or concern. I would say a good number of some do, of course, but I would say a good number of people who are struggling really need an empathic ear. They need someone to really genuinely care for them and pay attention to them and listen to them. Um, I would say a good number of people out there just want to be heard and want to be seen. They're not necessarily looking for solutions. Well, listen, you got to do this or you should have done that. Even in therapy, I try to reel back from that type of approach. A lot of validation, a lot of identifying, um, a lot of listening. Um, I think that can really go a long way. And then if it seems like it's edging the issues or concerns that your friend or your peer might be presenting with are kind of edging outside your comfort zone. If you're not a clinician, that's when you can talk about CAPS, you can talk about other resources, and usually I try to do that not in a pressure way or a heavy-handed way. It's like, hey, did you know we have actually therapists on campus? It's easy to make an appointment. This is what you do. If you feel comfortable yourself, if you've struggled along the way and you've had some support with therapy, you might want to say that too. I've know where you're coming from. I've been there and I've gotten some support as well.
Are there any signs in a friend that should try to push you to getting them to find and seek out medical help?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say mostly if there's like a dramatic change in mood or behavior from how the person normally is. And so if you have, for example, I guess, a person who tends to be really sociable and outgoing, suddenly isolating and not leaving the room and not responding to texts or invitations, seems like you would go out and kind of hang out with them and go to lunch, and suddenly they don't want to go to lunch. Maybe they start talking about how futile and hopelessness their situation or their life may be. Might be one example, and then increase in substance abuse, smoking more weed than usual or drinking more than usual, and then certainly if your friends or your peers or your loved ones start talking about suicide or not wanting to be here, that's not necessarily an immediate jump. We have to call 911 or get somebody an immediate help. But ask them questions about those suicidal thoughts. Ask them if they've had them before. We've been trying more and more over the years through our department um, to make this a campus community where everybody feels comfortable asking the basic questions around suicide, so we can gather some more information. Number one, but also most people who are struggling on that level. This is to debunk the myth by that asking someone about suicide is going to prompt them or encourage them to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the opposite. A lot of those thoughts can feel very private and occur in the shadows and in the wee hours of the night or in the morning. And so by asking someone if they're having thoughts of suicide, what you're doing is you're showing them that you're curious and you're interested and you're not afraid to have that conversation. And then if it starts going towards concerning, that this actually might happen or the person is thinking of taking their life, as a plan or intent, that's when a call to CAPS would be a good idea. Yeah.
Um, in your experience, what is one aspect of young adult mental health that you believe is often overlooked or misunderstood by either students or professionals in the field?
Hmm. Overlooked. Say it again. Do you mind?
Yeah, no. What is one aspect of mental health, and typically in young adults, because that's what we're like focused
Right.
on. But if you have to branch off of that, that's
Yeah.
fine. Like, what do you think is often overlooked or misunderstood, and whether that's overlooked by students or misunderstood by professionals?
Right. 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 Not sure if this entirely answers your question, but I think life is messy, life is imperfect. This is a time of life, obviously, where there's a lot of changes, a lot of transitions, a lot of developmental stuff happening, and so sometimes people on campus or people off campus, I'm sure this happens too, can look at a young adult or teenagers and think, well, because this person tends to cry easily, or have the occasional outburst, or be irritable, or maybe have a couple rough nights here with interpersonal conflict, that suddenly this is like a clinical issue that we need to address, or suddenly somebody decides to dye their hair blue or try out a new line of clothing or identity, so to speak, to try on and to see if it fits. It's a time of exploration and developmentally. How I see it is young people should be doing all this stuff and trying to find their way. And so in mental health, sometimes I think there could be almost like a going overboard, that suddenly because somebody is crying, that we need to call a professional
Yeah.
therapist and counselor and get an intervention right away or support. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many times should someone cry a week?
I would say on average, probably around 5, maybe no more than 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No.
funny you should mention that because, I know you're joking, but
In a way.
in a way, right? But we love to quantify things in
Mhm.
psychology. Sometimes we're the worst at this, that you have to grieve a certain time, or if you're crying too much, or, that therefore it becomes a clinically diagnosable thing. I would say it depends on the person. And again, if there's a change from the norm, I think that's when we should start paying attention. Suddenly someone who tends to be very emotional and crying all the time suddenly is not crying, and it maybe moving away from people or their usual interests. Maybe we should pay attention to that.
Mm.
Somebody who tends to be keep it all together all the time and is crying a lot, then maybe we should pay attention to that. But again, I think watching a kind of knee-jerk reaction, or saying that you need to be in therapy, you need to find a therapist. Sometimes that's the person who's sitting with them that's uncomfortable, and they say, "I can't handle this, so you
Yeah.
should go talk to Cap." So,
Yeah, no, the reason why I ask is I personally think, and I'm supported by no psychological research,
okay,
but it's healthy to cry
yes,
in a way.
it's normal.
And even if it's just like one time I dropped applesauce and it was just a long day, I cried.
Right.
It was nothing about the applesauce. It was just a long day, and I
Yes,
cried. Um,
exactly.
but when I was a child, I was super emotional. Pop the popcorn bag, I'm crying.
Yeah.
I've shifted into this standard of a man, some call it, that like I don't cry. Like I find it hard to cry sometimes. Like
Okay.
people like are crying around me and they're like, why aren't you crying?
Yeah, well, come
And
into
so
come into my office, and we'll see how long that lasts.
yeah. So just like
But yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go
you're
ahead.
good. I was just sometimes I freak out. I'm like, should I be crying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, crying. There's a lot of energy around crying. A lot of messaging around it. You mentioned being a man, and there's that. There's the whole idea of being a baby. We kind of have grown up now, and we shouldn't cry. But even crying too little. I've had experiences in my life where I'm loss of a loved one, or somebody or something has happened, and I wonder, what's wrong with me? I should be crying. And so really keeping an eye on the judgmental piece, and really just, I think accessing whatever emotion is there at the time and not trying to be too hard on yourself. So.
Yeah. And now I'm just thinking, um, do you enjoy what you do?
Yes, I do. I do. I feel very fortunate that I am in a job where I can be of service to people, genuinely. And I feel very lucky that the the struggles that I have had along the way, and the bumps in the road and mental health difficulties, that I can take all that and not talk about myself to every student I work with, but let it inform the work and be in a spot where I can use that to deepen my compassion and understanding and empathy with folks. And I sometimes feel I like a lot of people, I have a pretty bad like selfish streak, meaning I'm going to do my own thing and held, I'm not allowed to say that. So like, everyone else be damned. Um, and I got to keep an eye on that part of me. And I feel like because I'm in this kind of service work and I do it day in and day out, it allows me to give back and fill me up too.
Yeah.
It's not about me giving all the time. It's how I see it. It's human to human. It's thankfully I think our field has moved away from the expert treating the wounded. It's more of like equals, the wounded helping the wounded.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a little more sewed up at the
Yeah.
moment than the person sitting across from me. And so, do I enjoy it? Is every day just a lovely walk in the park? Absolutely not. Do I feel when my applesauce breaks at the end of the day, do I cry and lose it? Yes, I do. Is it tiring? Is it taxing? Is it emotionally draining? Yes, it is at times. But I find that as director, one of the things that I didn't want to do, I knew I'd have to be an administrator, plan, deal with staff, sign a lot of forms, send a lot of emails. I'm not great at it. I don't think I've learned to improve, but I worried that as director, I would start moving away from the clinical work, and I have to some degree. But I find that when I'm not working with students behind closed doors, it's when I'm not so happy. I'm kind of grumpier. I'm not having as much fun.
Yeah.
So
If there was a student standing right at that camera and
yes,
they were struggling with mental health, what is one thing you would tell them right now? What would you want to say to them?
yeah, I would say be kind to yourself. Try to be gentle with yourself, because to me, it's like if I were to sum it up, it's like there's the struggle, and then there's the judgment of the struggle. And so, you're suffering, you're hurting. That's a real thing. Honor that, feel it. Don't be afraid to reach out for help and support. But if you can work on that layer of like judging it, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Other people have it worse than me. Here I am again struggling with the same type of thing. I can't believe I'm back in the same old jam, whatever it might be. And so, if you can be kind to yourself and be a little softer and gentler, um, kind of ease up on that layer. It's not going to solve everything. It may not even ease the core suffering, but it can allow you, hopefully, to legitimize and validate what you're going through, and either reach out for professional support or let somebody know. I would say, I've gone to way too much schooling and got my doctorate, and they teach you all kinds of theories and all kinds of approaches and methodologies. And I say one of my most brilliant ideas is to, maybe not isolate so much. Try to find your people, so to speak. The social connections matter so much, and try to befriend yourself. This whole self-love thing, I think, can go a little too far. It can be very hard for people to even approximate what it means to self-love. So I'm like, be a friend to yourself. What would a friend do right now? A friend would like close the book and go get something to eat, or a friend would have a drink of water because they haven't had a drink of water in 12 hours. A friend would say it's okay to take a break and go watch a dumb movie with a friend, another friend, and kind of hang out, that type of thing.
And I know there are a lot of laws around this and what you
Yes.
can and cannot talk about.
Yes.
So take whatever you can, spin it away, or whatever you need to do, flat out deny it. Is there ever been any cases or students or people or someone that you've met, that you've dealt with, that you've talked to, that you've tried to help, that changed the course of how you treat every scenario differently?
Oh, wow. I've never entertained that kind of question before. I, I don't know if there's one particular case or person that stands out as being a transformative experience that has changed the direction of my approach or how I work. So not one in particular. It's more of like a compilation of many people over time. I will say that when I was in training and was terrified of being a therapist and didn't know if I can offer very much, and working with people in a community mental health clinic who not only struggled with their own personal mental health, but just had a lot of difficulties with family and with finances and holding a job, all kinds of stuff, poverty. And so a good number of these folks that I would work with were it's like a rotating door, and so they would come in and they'd get a new therapist every year, and I just happened to be the new therapist of the year. And there was this one woman who I worked with who was she was sweet. She was probably maybe in her 60s. I was maybe in my early 30s at the time, and she struggled with a psychotic disorder, and she was on a lot of different medications to help with that. But I didn't get a chance to read her chart before I met with her, and so I had no clue that she struggled with psychosis and so I just kind of got to know her and met her where she's at, so to speak, and wasn't thinking about diagnosis or medications. And I think partly because of that, partly because I was new and I didn't know her history, um, I connected with her greatly. At least I felt it. I feel like she probably felt it too. She gave me a nice little gift at the end of our sessions together, and ended up hearing, I guess, from some of the people at the community mental health clinic that have worked with her over time for some time, saying that she really enjoyed working with me and I had a positive impact. I mean, the message of that is that I think our field can get way too bogged down in concepts and theories and diagnoses, and that at the end of the day, again, it's the human connection that really matters. So,
And with the same disclaimer that I had
yeah.
before, um, is there anything that was either the most challenging for you to help with, something that was just like you needed to seek out something else or someone else to figure out what to do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a good team at CAPS, and so one of the things we always try to do is consult and not go it alone. Um, and so, we see, not a lot, but a fair number of students who struggle with suicidal thinking, for example, and that doesn't mean because someone struggles with that off they go to the hospital. I mean, that's a process that we take very seriously, and it's only kind of like a feeling like if the student can't be saved, that becomes an option at times. But those working with students who are struggling at that level can certainly be a challenge. But again, I get my support from my team. Um, there's I think working with. I'm thinking of this one woman I worked with who was in she was in a domestic violence situation with her partner. And if you know anything about domestic violence, thankfully I feel like more people do these days. Um, you don't want to get into blame of anyone. It's a dynamic that could be really hard to shift and really hard to change. And this was a bright woman who had a lot of insight into herself, could see the dynamics quite clearly. She worked on that in therapy, but just really, really um, had difficulty making the decision to leave the relationship or to change aspects of the relationship to keep herself safe and happy. And so I felt helpless at times in working with this particular person, and you know, uh, invited other resources, domestic violence support networks and other resources for her to access and get some support around. But at that time in her life, she was, unwilling slash unable, and part of it was the cycle of abuse that kept her stuck, and so that was a challenge. I do remember that.
We
Yeah.
can flip this on its head so it can get a little lighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anything that just maybe not boosted yourself, but it made you like sigh of relief? Like I've done something, I've felt something, I've heard something, and now you're happy or you know,
Yeah. You mean just like helping people
yeah,
along?
yeah.
Um. Yeah. I mean, it's always nice. I mean, this doesn't happen all the time. It's kind of like you do your work, you hope for a good outcome, and oftentimes you don't see uh, the clients you've worked with ever again. Um, every once in a while, somebody will send me a little note or an email, kind of letting me know that they're doing better in their lives and that they um, are on a better path or they're happier or whatever addiction they've struggled with or self-loathing, that it's really lifted and changed. And they might give me some props for that, our work together. And that's always great. And some I've had experiences where those messages have come at a time maybe where I'm feeling overwhelmed or overloaded, and I'm like, yeah, that's why I do the work. And I don't take any kind of selfish credit for that. I'm just one kind of piece of the puzzle, one little stepping stone in people's lives. But if I can um, help support them, even in a little way that always feels good. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to add, talk about, anything at all? Like any, this is like your last time to get anything you've
Last
thought
time.
about, want to talk about.
Jeez. I don't know. I mean, so the media, the news. I mean, I've known people in my life, and I should probably do this too, who are like, I just don't watch the news anymore. I
Mm.
don't realize it, right? It's a, it's a snapshot and it's a lens through which we oftentimes see the horrors of what's happening in the world, and that could be very important. We need to raise awareness. We need to shine spotlights on these terrible things so that we can, um, get informed and hopefully move towards change. But I think the same thing could happen with mental health, especially working with young people. Kids these days, they're snowflakes. They're not resilient. They're so anxious. They can't even tie their shoelaces, or they're um, they're gonna they're the future of our country, and look how bad it is, and because they're addicted to drugs or whatever. And so it's not to minimize the suffering of young people and this generation and generations to come, but I feel like we don't talk enough about the resilience and about the curiosity that the students I work with have, and their intellectual abilities and their passions and their care and their love, and their ability to think outside the box and support one another. And so I guess, ending on that kind of note, that I'd love to see more of that. Every once in a while, someone might want to give a testimonial about their path or their journey, struggles with mental health and how they've gotten better. I always love to shine spotlights on those topics as well, and to invite and encourage that, because people need to see that there's hope and that there's ways through it. It's not always easy. There's ways around it. I feel like a lot of people try to find ways around it, but there's ways through it, and not always pleasant, not always fun. Takes a lot of courage, but I've seen people get better that they thought they can never get better. In fact, I was working with someone recently who asked me that question. Am I too far gone? And I would genuinely said no, because I've seen people worse off than that particular student at the time get better and improve. So that's all I got. I'm
All
sure I can
right.
go on and on, but
Well, that was amazing. Thank you again so much for being here.
yeah.
If you want to just state, what you work for, your name, anything like that again. And,
Yeah. So Jeff Burda, I'm the director of Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, here at the University of Hartford. Thanks for
all
having me.
right. Thank you so much.
All right.
And that is it.
Recording. I'm still recording. I have one question for
Oh.
Jeff I want to ask.
Sure.
So Jeff, I'm going to take a single here. Jeff, some students in my class, I reached out to you recently to ask you about the questionnaire. They said, why doesn't the university have a hotline, like the suicide hotline or trans lifeline, where you can call and just talk to somebody without having to go through a pre-interview? And what are your thoughts about having something like that? Is it a budgetary thing, or is it more of a policy thing?
So the idea being like a CAPS University employee, possibly.
Yeah, they called it InstaCap. They wanted to have something where you basically just go online or on your phone and
Yeah.
have someone to talk to.
Right. So I would say if you wanted that, if students wanted that to be a CAPS kind of in-house or university thing, then yes, it would be mainly like a resource issue. They'd have to hire more people and extend the hours in order to allow us to do something like that. If they wanted to outsource it, that also becomes a budget issue. Maybe less costly. There are certainly platforms and programs and therapists, certainly in Connecticut, but outside of Connecticut, who are willing and able to provide that kind of service, and the university would have to pay for it. So I think in a lot of ways it comes down to money.
Anything to add, Matthew? Is that good? Can I stop now?
Yeah, no, we're all good.
Good. You did 59 minutes.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Perfect. Of course.